This podcast explores how artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and robotics are transforming the way we design and build physical objects, ranging from a voice activated robotic fabrication to AR assisted Lego and bamboo construction. Yeah, I mean, this is highly visionary and it does a great job explaining complex technical systems simply, but we do have some significant structural and thematic disconnects to address. So let's dive right in. I mean, there is a lot of really rich material here. So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the progression of these fabrication examples. Start with the speech to reality robot that creates objects, then move into the AR assisted Lego assembly, transition into active bamboo bending, and finally land on cutting massive logs for a tower using gesture recognition. It is quite a journey. The current arrangement feels a bit like, I don't know, an all you can eat buffet of incredible technologies. We are just sort of walking down a line, putting a bit of everything on our plate in no particular order. What we really need is a curated multi course meal where each dish intentionally prepares the palate for the next. It is like a nice buffet analogy. It feels like we are jumping between entirely different philosophies of making things without a safety net. Because the core vulnerability in the current draft is that it begins with speech to reality, which is by far the most passive form of making. I mean, you literally speak a sentence and the machine does the rest. Yeah, you just sit there. The author presents this as the ultimate utopian solution for accessibility, time saving, and democratizing design. But then, almost immediately, the text abruptly pivots to arguing for hands on engagement and creative freedom through the AR Lego and bamboo projects, which is totally different. And it does this without a clear philosophical bridge explaining exactly why we are moving away from that fully automated ideal that was just established. But then we are tracking 3D Lego pieces in real time, specifically to keep human hands fully engaged in the process. Automation is supposed to be the hero or the villain of this story. Well, my suggestion would be to reframe the overall structure to explicitly introduce the concept of a sliding scale of agency. Use this spectrum as the structural spine that connects all of these diverse projects rather than just, you know, listing to them chronologically. I will cover three distinct phases of this technological shift: pure automation, guided collaboration, and augmented physical intuition. We're basically seeing how to compartmentalize the information. The Lego project isn't a contradiction to the robot making objects, it is just the next notch on the dial of human involvement. And then you need to physically bridge the sections. How so? Well, when transitioning from the speech to reality robot to the AR Lego project, insert a bridging thought that challenges the first premise. Something like, total automation removes the joy of tactile making. We don't necessarily want robots to have all the fun, which leads us to the middle ground of our spectrum, assisted assembly, because it honors the human desire to touch things, it validates the progression, and it tells we aren't abandoning the first idea, we are just exploring the landscape adjacent to it. It makes the progression feel inevitable rather than random. I mean, it turns a list of projects into a cohesive exploration of human involvement. Yeah, setting up that sliding scale of agency definitely solves the structural flow, but it also exposes a new problem. Well, if we are scaling from passive to active, what is the actual payoff of that scale? While a log tower or a custom Lego set is fascinating, there is a real risk that these examples feel too niche or maybe just localized to an academic lab setting. Yet, the specific real world applications or broader societal implications for these advanced fabrication methods, they remain somewhat underexplored, like a robotic arm cutting a log based on where a user touches it in an augmented reality headset, which is a technical marvel. But if the end result is just a single experimental structure on a university campus, the macroeconomic stakes remain completely invisible. The gap here is that the stakes in the current material remain entirely localized to art installations or hobbyist endeavors or abstract modular structures. It is entirely left to you to connect the dots regarding how these breakthroughs might scale to solve urgent global challenges like mass manufacturing or sustainability. I am investing my time in learning about this deep tech. I want to know it moves the needle for humanity, right? Not just for a graduate student's thesis project. My suggestion is to just ground these technical marvels in high stakes, real world industry applications that emphasize why this matters outside of academia. You basically just scale the impact of the tools. Okay, so we just expand the lens outward. What are some concrete examples of how to do that seamlessly? Well, let's take the speech to reality robot. Right now, it builds an object. Cool. But to raise the stakes, how this on demand capability could absolutely revolutionize disaster relief. Imagine emergency responders using this exact voice to fabrication technology to instantly create custom shelters, or structural supports, or even complex medical splints right on site in a hurricane zone, completely bypassing broken supply chains. Now, that completely changes the weight of the technology, doesn't it? Suddenly, a robot assembling a table with one leg isn't just a quirky parlor trick, it is a proof of concept for saving lives when logistics completely collapse. You didn't change the technology in the text at all, you just changed the context of its deployment. Now, let's look at the bamboo and log tower projects from the perspective of the construction industry. Connect the concepts of minimal waste, modular reusability, and stretching raw logs to the urgent need for sustainable architecture. You can directly tie this to reducing the massive carbon footprint of the traditional concrete and steel construction industry. That makes sense. I mean, minimal waste in passing, but anchoring it to global carbon footprints and the crisis of modern construction, well, that elevates the stakes from an academic curiosity to a planetary necessity. It really does. We are fundamentally shifting the so what of the entire thing. And doing so doesn't require stripping away the charm of the original examples. It just requires tying those charming projects to massive, heavy anchors in the real world. So, having aligned the structure with our sliding scale and having raised the societal stakes to global levels, we naturally transition to the emotional and philosophical core of the conclusion. We have to address what this entire technological shift actually means for the human creator. As I understand it, the argument here that while AI accelerates production, true creativity isn't just about getting from point A to point B, it is about the process, the exploration, and the joy of bringing something new to the world. The robot is doing the exploration. And because of that paradox, the material's philosophical stance on what constitutes a creator feels slightly unresolved. If the robot is doing all the physical exploration in the first example, the human's role changes entirely. You cannot apply a 19th century definition of a craftsman to a 21st century prompt engineer. They are completely different. My suggestion is to lean into this inherent tension rather than smoothing it over or pretending it doesn't exist. Use the contrast between the different projects to explicitly define the new types of creativity that emerge at different stages of AI collaboration. Yeah, you are basically giving a new vocabulary to understand their changing relationship with their tools. Let's talk about concrete examples. How do we define these new types of creativity? It is exactly like a film director. The director almost never operates the camera or builds the sets or wires the lighting, but the film is undeniably their creative vision. You are the director of the fabrication lab. Now contrast this with the AR, bamboo, and log cutting phases. Define those as tactile creativity, where the human is a physical co pilot with the machine. You are out there on the floor negotiating with gravity, feeling the resistance of the wood and making micro adjustments in real time alongside the AI. So we have curatorial creativity on one end of our sliding scale and tactile creativity on the other. That is a remarkably robust framework. Technology helps us bring wonderful things into the world way stronger. It turns a relatively standard feel good conclusion into a deeply provocative challenge. Am I going to be a curatorial creator or a tactile creator? Am I the director or am I the co pilot? It gives us a new vocabulary to understand our own future. It doesn't just show you new tools, it gives you new words to describe your evolving relationship to those tools. It ensures us to still think about the material long after you listen to it. So let's briefly recap our three main actionable takeaways. First, we need to fix the structural disjointedness by framing the entire presentation around a sliding scale of agency. We are moving from pure automation to physical intuition, and using strong bridging transitions, we completely eliminate the philosophical whiplash between the different projects. Crucial first step. Second, we have to explore the broader societal implications of these technologies. We need to ground the technical marvels by tying the specific examples to global issues. We mentioned framing the speech to reality robot as a tool for disaster relief and anchoring the log and bamboo projects to the urgent need for sustainable architecture. This elevates the stakes from an academic lab to a planetary necessity. It answers the so what And third, instead of using old definitions of craftsmanship, we need to explicitly define curatorial creativity versus tactile creativity and challenge ourselves to figure out where they fit in this new paradigm. Those three shifts, establishing the structural spectrum, raising the macro stakes, and defining the new philosophy of creation. This is super exciting stuff. Let's take a pause and conclude this episode. We'll meet you again in the next podcast.